Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to hook up one of these sort of standard LCD displays, and we'll hook it up to an Arduino Uno. Now this will work with any of the standard Arduino platform boards. It doesn't really matter. Every one that I've ever worked with works just fine as long as we follow these simple procedures that's already spelled out in the Arduino library. So that being said, let's get started by actually opening up an example program which is already pre-installed in Arduino. So I'm going to go to File, I'm going to go to Examples, I'm going to go to Liquid Crystal, and I'm going to go to Hello World. Great place to start. And we'll pull that over. I'm going to close this out. And let's pull this up. And what we want to do is we want to follow this wiring diagram, at least initially. We can change it. We can assign the pin values where we want to. But we're going to follow this basic diagram right now. I am going to caution, let's not get too carried away. This last little bit right here, I'm going to explain in greater detail after we hook up all these other pins. All right? And I'll also point out that this particular LCD display that I have has a backlight, and that's actually going to be pins 15 and 16, and you can see they're labeled A and K, which stands for anode and cathode. And we'll be hooking this guy up last, but that's going to give us the backlight display that we need. And that's not included in this list right here. So, that being said, I can hook this guy up anywhere I want, but it does take 16 pins. It takes a good chunk of your board. It could be here, it could be anywhere, but I'm going to have it right on the edge. Okay, so I'm going to have it on the last set of pins and the very last set of columns on this side of the board, so I minimize any space that it takes, at least on this side of the board. And I think we can still see it and read it relatively well. Maybe I'll move this over so it's a little more center. And I've already wired the breadboard to be with a common bus and a common power supply. So the ground pin right here is hooked up to ground on my Arduino, and it goes to the blue bus. And my red wire here is hooked to 5 volts, and it goes to my red. Okay? So now let's just go down the list, and we'll do it one by one. So we'll do the first one. The RS pin, okay, let me put my glasses on, is hooked to pin 12 in this example. Again, we can rearrange things if we need to. So RS is the 4th pin in, and I'm going to hook it to pin 12. Next on my list is the Enable pin, and it's hooked to pin 11. And on this particular LCD, Enable is just with an E. There's no Enable. So just E, and I'm hooked that up to pin 11, like so. And then we go on down to the digital pins. So these are the ones that are going to actually send the signal of what to say. So D4 is hooked to pin 5. Pin 5. And just going down the list, D5 is hooked to pin 4. And again, at some point, if we want to switch it so they're not crossing over, we can assign these values. It's not that hard to do. But we'll do the basic example as I have set up, just to follow through the first time. D6 is hooked to pin 3. And last but not least, I'm running out of color choices here. I'm going to choose a blue one. D7 is hooked to pin 2. All right. And then we look at this. The RW pin is hooked to ground. RW is right here. And I'm going to plug it into my blue bus, the ground bus. The VSS pin, very first one, is also hooked to ground. The VCC, now in this case, on this particular one, it's actually labeled VDD. Okay, so the second pin in on this particular case is in fact the one that has to go to the 5-volt supply. So I'm going to go ahead and put the second pin, the VDD, or VCC as it says here, into the positive bus. like so. I should actually move these all over a little bit, because I'm going to put the potentiometer over here. All right. And then now they say you can use a 10K resistor, or they also talk about this wiper. So what I'm actually going to use is a 10K potentiometer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug my potentiometer in right here. Well, actually, I'll hook up these wires first. To make a potentiometer work, what we really want to do is we want to have one end of the potentiometer hooked to positive, one end of the potentiometer hooked to ground, and then this middle one, which is oftentimes called the wiper. All right, so this is where that metal bar slides around. It wipes against the variable resistor, or the resistor, which is built into this, the wiper. That's ultimately going to hook to the VO pin, which is the third pin in. Okay, so I'm going to plug this guy in right here. A little bit of actually, I'll plug these in first. First, I'm going to do is put a red wire. And then these are spaced out every other. So I'm going to put a black wire to ground. So now my positive and ground are in place. And I can push this potentiometer in here like so. And then the last thing I need is a wire right between the two. That center lead. And it's ultimately going to go to VO. And believe it or not, you know, I mean, I actually think if we did this correctly, that ought to work. We should be able to get a basic display going. So I'm going to plug my board in. Plug it into my USB here. And hopefully, if I did everything correctly. Oh, and look, I haven't applied my anode and cathode yet. Okay? So my cathode, it needs to go to ground. Okay? So my very last pin, the cathode with a K, has to go to ground. And my anode, with an A, needs to go to positive. And now the board, in fact, lights up. And we are ready to load the basic code in. I'm not going to do anything else. I am simply going to make sure that my port is connected. I'm using a generic Uno here, which doesn't show up as an Uno. And I'm going to go ahead and load it up. And if everything goes okay, we should get a hello world and a counter that displays. Now, if we don't see anything, in fact, maybe I'll point it all the way over here. This happens a lot. So once it loads, you might find yourself saying, oh gosh, it didn't work because nothing shows up on my display. And if that's the case, let's wait for it to load. And here it goes. It's like nothing worked. Well, that's probably because you don't have your contrast set. So start turning the knob until eventually you get the contrast exactly where you want it. Okay? So hopefully this is useful, and I will see you all again real soon, I'm sure.